Welcome to the Knowledge Dialogues 2024. I ask all of you to turn on your cameras so we can meet in this space. There we go. I see 5 of you. Okay, we're gonna start. Good morning. My name is Emilia Marmolejo Lopez. I am an anthropologist, an IB graduate, and an Individuals and Societies teacher for the Middle Years program at Colegio Internacional Terranova. It is an honor for me to be your moderator today, as you discuss the question that unites us on this day. To what extent does considering feelings, thoughts, sentipensares, contribute to knowledge? I remind you that this is a safe space, and I ask for your contribution to make it so. It should be inclusive and a respectful space. This session will last roughly 100 minutes, and each participation will be limited to 90 seconds to ensure that you all get a chance to participate. Sentipensares, or translated feelings, thoughts, is a concept that immediately takes us out of how most of us in the West think about the world. It encompasses philosophies of the world that were not born in Greece or stem from the Enlightenment, where reason comes before everything else, and definitely before feelings. Sentipensares is a term first used by sociologists and anthropologists to describe the philosophies of native peoples in this continent, or continents, depending on who you ask. These worldviews, although different, share a common trait, that to think and to feel are not separate, and therefore have no hierarchy. Today, I feel deeply honored to host this discussion table with you. IB students from different schools, cultures, and possibly different sentipensares, we'll see, and where you will share your perspectives, on if and how feelings, thoughts contribute to knowledge. I will now present the students joining us today. I appreciate if you wave so we all know who you are. Representing the Universidad of Celaya, Prepa Uni, Hania Mireli Servin Vázquez. Yeah, okay. Representing Instituto San Miguelense, María Isabela Chávez Francis. Representing Navajo Prep School, Jude Thomas. Representing Navajo Prep School, Starlet Bigay. Representing Navajo Prep School, Tamaron Austin. Representing Colegio La Paz de Chiapas AC, Bárbara Janine Moisés Ramos. Representing Colegio Arjí, Rosario Esther Bravo García. Representing Colegio Arjí, María Patricia Valenzuela Cruz. And representing Colegio Arjí, Pilar Elena Rojas Pato. And last but not least, representing Colegio Terranova, Marta Sofía Gámez. Okay, so anybody wants to start this conversation with your contribution?
Hi, good morning. I just want to say that the student Charito or Rosario is not going to be able to be with us today because she suffers a kind of inconvenience.
Thank you, Maria. I take a note of that. Okay. Okay, so I remind all of you our question today: to what extent does considering feelings, thoughts, sentipensares contribute to knowledge? Who's the brave one who will start with this conversation?
Can I start?
Sure.
Okay. Good morning. So, according to the question, to what extent considering feelings thoughts contribute to knowledge? I consider that thoughts and feelings go hand in hand, influencing one another. Our thoughts affect how we perceive and experience our feelings. Looking for the definitions of those two words in the dictionary, feelings is the affected state of mind, and thoughts is the faculty or ability to think. When this information is obtained, we can begin to answer the question, to what extent does feeling thoughts contribute to knowledge? According to psychology, emotions and thoughts are closely related to learning and acquisition of knowledge. For example, if we have negative thoughts, we can have feel motivated in, and not try as hard as we should. On the contrary, if we think positive thoughts and trust in our ability to learn, we are more likely to feel motivated and committed to the learning process. In general, emotions can affect how we process information and how we record it. The reason for this is that because he's established in multiple ways, emotion influence the memory, the ability to reason, decision making, and attitude for learning. So we can conclude that feelings are significant for the learning process. However, emotion alone does not seem capable of producing theoretical knowledge. In fact, emotion often obstructs it. Emotion alone cannot make it possible for us to know how to do something, but it can be a necessary condition for us to know how to do it. The mind processes information we receive and interprets in a way that influences our emotions. According to Vizquera, we learn what we really want to. People want to learn what it is important for them for their life and for their survival. And since not everything fits in the brain, what we consider not important does not interest us and we forget. That is why it's recommended that when trying to transmit knowledge, emotion should not be taken into account. Finally, thoughts and feelings are intrinsically connected, influencing our perception and experience of the world. Emotion can be a necessary condition for us to acquire skills and knowledge. Our mind processes information and interprets, influencing our emotions and in turn affecting our perception of the world and our ability to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Does anybody want to reply to Hannah or offer something additional? Barbara, do I see you hesitating?
Yes, I was just thinking that knowledge it also can be influenced by the emotions. So I think it's a great thing that it can make so we can use as a tool to facilitate reasoning. Also, it's a way for us to understand better the things they explain us in class. But as she says, I think that also emotions maybe can lack that knowledge that we acquire. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Barbara. Anybody else? Following up what Barbara said, she says that emotion can be a tool to facilitate reasoning. So I ask you, is reasoning more important than feeling?
Um, I think that it depends completely on the perspective. If we take it from a philosophical point of view, we have two parts that are important to consider, the empirist and the ones that are rationalists. I think that's how you pronounce it in English. And empirists believe that knowledge comes from the sensory and visual experience. So, yes, knowledge comes from emotions, but rationalists emphasize the role of reasoning and intimate ideas acquiring knowledge. Emotions, in this view, can be a bias. So you actually don't understand if you have emotions in this context. So I think emotions are really depending on the perspective we have and the perspective we want to take to know what influence knowledge has on what we believe.
Thank you, Marta. Does anybody else want to answer that question?
I think it's depending on the process because it is important, as Marta said, that our perspective we have, and I think like the emotions can influence like in the decision of the way we think, but I think it's part of the process that reasoning can affect of in our feelings and in the to contribute to knowledge to have an answer. So.
Okay, so following up what Marta said and what Hania just contributed to, emotion as a bias, when is emotion a bias? In which context do we think that emotion can be a bias?
Okay, for emotion can be biased in certain periods of time, like throughout history. I guess what I'm referring to would be like nationalism, or like when you have too much of an ideology that blinds people or that blinds rationale, then that can be dangerous. And so that like emotion, like we let our emotions sometimes guide or overtake our rationale. So like if you're angry, then you don't really think about what you're gonna say next, and you can just like spit out whatever, and so that can be dangerous, and that can like ruin a relationship with someone, like your family members or something. Like if you just say something like impulsive like that because of your emotions, and that really is detrimental. And so something like that can be very can is what emotion can do. So.
Does anybody want to reply to Tamara?
Yeah, it's to complete his point of view. I think that emotion can be a bias when we try to be objective, and when an example are stereotypes. When you have a strong emotional reaction based on what you already on knowledge you have, but it's this knowledge was acquired by an emotional thinking and reasoning, then you cannot be objective. And this can make your decision making process be a little bit blinded by what you already know and what you feel. So emotions can be a bias when you're trying to be objective.
Okay, anybody else? So far, we've discussed emotion as that it can be a strength and it can also be a bias. I wanted to ask you whether do you think rationality can also be a bias in some contexts?
Can I add on to the emotion
Of course.
discussion?
Yeah, of course.
So, well, I think that the brain uses emotional constructs like imagination and empathy to understand the world and to understand knowledge. And throughout emotion and imagination, we explain things and that are based off of our experiences in life. And those are what creates the biases that we have and how we create different perspectives on what's going on around us.
Do you think you could offer an example?
Well, I think the main example that I think of is violence, because everyone fears violence against ourselves and against other people, but many of us haven't even lived it. So by using imagination and emotion, well, in the form of empathy, we create this image in our head of what violence can look like, and try to prevent it with that.
Thank you, Maria Isabella. So now Maria Isabella has added empathy into the panorama through emotion, and I want to then go back to the original question: can empathy at any point be considered bias?
Can I talk? Well, I
Yeah.
think that sometimes empathy can be considered as a kind of not a very good point, because sometimes we as human beings can feel a lot more than we should in any kind of situations. So if we like in a dangerous situation or in a love situation or something like that, sometimes we can let our judgment be blind in order, because we let our emotions and our empathy goes a little bit more further than it should be, and it can affect our judgment and like get it not very clear. So that can be a problem in the future in order to try to solve any kind of problem or situation that we like to or we don't understand.
Do you think you could offer an example?
I think I could say as an example, maybe when someone makes you hurt in any kind of situations, and you try to feel sympathy for them, but that maybe that person can be meaner or it's meaner than you thought. And sometimes they try to, I don't know how can I say it, but they try to take advantage of you maybe, and that can affect you and your situation, and that wouldn't be good, I think.
Thank you. Does anybody want to reply to your not classmate?
I want to talk. Please.
I think it's Pilar.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Replying to what my classmate just said, well, I think that when we relate our emotions to external experiences that we are living at the moment, we are not being really that deep into what's happening, but we cannot interfere by being led by these emotions that we all experience actually. Because it's like a gut feeling deep inside us that's telling us what to do and what to feel. And so we feel like the need to support and follow this because it's something that's saying to stay in our own and known limits. But it will be a complication, obviously, when needing to find a balance and being more objective.
Thank you, Pilar. Does anybody want to add to that or ask any question? Okay, so now Pilar has added something interesting, how feelings sometimes are difficult to ignore. So if we've established that feelings can be a bias, how do we prevent them from becoming a bias and from not allowing us to take objective decisions, as Marta Sofia, was talking about earlier?
I can speak. So with bias, considering feelings and thoughts, it also opens a factor of open-mindedness and perspective. It gives you a good distinction of what's good and bad between situations that you are thinking of. And so bias isn't all that bad. It can be a good thing and a bad thing when you're talking about contributing to knowledge. Yeah.
Do you think you could offer an example? It could be from your personal life, any conflict you've had.
Well, in our culture, in my Navajo culture, we use Navajo, we use our culture to like determine what's bad and wrong. For example, we can't whistle at night due to our own. We believe that it causes evil spirits to come hear us. So to another person, that's I just gave you new knowledge, and you have to be considered. Yeah, your feelings are being considered right now to what I just told you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have a question, additional comment?
I would like to add something replying to the last speaker. Well, although sometimes a bias can be something bad because we are like trying to be ahead of the situation and interpret it in the better way. Also, as the last speaker said, I think sometimes it helps and it makes us feel in a protective way, like from unknown situations, like trying to go through something we don't know in the most protected way, secure way. And also, in order to add to the question and the topic, it's an important thing to understand and analyze the human emotions and how they affect the variables of our behavior. And I think this is essential because when we try to comprehend from where we are acting and interacting with society in its peers or with other people that form part of the society. An example that maybe I could give can be through the different interpretations of art, of how can it be expressed and communicated in totally opposite ways, depending on the person who perceives it and from where.
Thank you, Pilar. Does anybody here want to reply to Pilar, add something on what she said?
I actually agree with her. She talks about the perspective and how we take it. I think that we're forgetting one perspective that it's like really important to take into account. That is neuroscience. Like by reading to the topic, we can see that emotions play a fundamental role in our brain and how it works and how we make decisions. And these decisions affect the rest of our lives, not like how we interact with others, how we socialize. So emotions are always present unconsciously. So I think that emotions are a bias to rationality, and rationality is a bias for emotions sometimes. But if you get a midpoint, you can make it work. But also like putting certain ratios. I don't know how to explain it, but like in feelings, okay, so your brain works based on feelings and emotions. That's how it, like in neuroscience, there is a bunch of examples like how, give me a second, how the amygdala is influenced by emotions, so we are most probable to remember things that are associated with emotions. So at the point that we can make a balance between what we feel, what we think, and how to be objective, I think there is a point, because when we balance these both things, we can be forgetting about the biases. I don't know if it makes sense. But being like an example is culture. Here we are from 3 different countries, I think so, and we are being rational to each other, we're being respectful, but we're also talking about contextual cultures and how to and this respect influences in how we talk to each other and how we accept the knowledge that other people are saying to us. I don't know if I make sense.
No, thank you. That made sense. Does anybody need Marta to repeat herself? Okay. Do we have any more questions, contributions to this topic, emotion as biases?
Yes, I want to add to what Marta says. I was thinking, I agree with her what she says about the amygdala, because in our brains it works that the emotions or the information that we receive from the things we are learning can depend on the reaction that it will have. So, for example, in this case, in science, the hippocampus will have an important role when we are taking decisions. So that can be a positive or negative reaction. And so emotions can also, sometimes they cannot be controlled by the way. So we need to stay like main point to maintain the emotions and knowledge, and not the emotion let us control the things that pass around us. And yeah.
Thank you, Barbara.
Is it possible to add on to what she said?
Yes, go ahead, Jude.
Ultimately, I think that you can't, like, feelings aren't, you can't take feelings away. Like, regardless of whether it's towards knowledge or anything, feelings are still going to be prevalent and present in whatever, like, contextual, like anything that it applies to. So I think it's important to not let feelings impact you, but it's more about how you interpret feelings and how you let them portray your perspective and persuasion.
Can I participate?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, actually, I agree with Thomas because, well, after all, we're all human beings with feelings, emotions, and personal experiences from which we base our perspectives of life and how we will react to them. They're almost something like an inevitable force that every day we empower, build, and develop. So I think it's almost impossible to do anything like speak, act, or even think without them getting in the middle of the way of that. Because most of the time, our emotions and feelings will make us have some deeper and inner thoughts about every situation that we encounter through life regarding experiential or transferred knowledge, which can make two main points or ideas that we have been discussing through the debate, that it can be seen something as a good factor, looking after what's the best for us and defining a unique or different point of view from a topic or argument, helping to enlarge the discussion and getting to possible truths. But also, by the other hand, we can see the disadvantage by being considered when not being fair in relation to other people's emotions, or also in relation to the main topic by diverting from the main and only point that should be considered.
Thank you, Pilar. Anybody else have any question or comment? Okay, many of you have now mentioned learning and knowledge acquisition in your contributions, and I wanted to ask you, how can emotion contribute to the acquisition of knowledge? Maybe you could share an experience in which emotions helped you learn something, acquired new knowledge.
Yes. So, for example, I want to say that I'm not really good at sometimes like physics or maths. It's like something a subject that is really hard to me to learn. But when I'm feeling happy or motivated in that day, I think I can learn more in the other days when I feel rather or like not bad, but sometimes sad or something else that just happened to me and I'm not feeling really good. So I think that's the role of the emotion when we are trying to learning something, and it's also an experience that can help others to understand how emotions are important in this process of knowledge. Yes.
If I may, I'd like to add on to that. In terms of like emotions and like growing knowledge, like empathy is a huge one. Like with cultural context, like if you go to another country or you indulge in a different culture and you're empathizing with others, or you're considering what they have that may be different from what it is in your culture, then you basically grow your knowledge and you have a better understanding, like a world perspective, basically a broader perspective of different cultures and nationalities, and so that makes you a better individual overall.
Well, I also think that emotions can be something essential when learning anything, like subject or, as I said before in another argument, some knowledge that can be experienced or transferred. And I think that an example that I could give could be like when I got into high school, I didn't really was into maths, but I we have like a really special connection with the teacher, so she motivated us and we will be more interested and attracted by the subject. So these are some kind of concepts and points that can be mainly the reasons of how we could learn through emotions.
I think that
I also think it's significant to acknowledge how uh, feelings and emotions can make you learn more about yourself. And I think learning more about yourself is a way of knowledge, if that makes sense. Like learning about in terms of like relationships with people, like you have like your friends and like people that you enjoy spending time with, and then you have other people where it's like not as enjoyable experience. So I guess that's one aspect of considering thoughts and feelings is like independently.
I think that emotions go in hand with the knowledge. You can relate it more like in the experiences you have. Like if you enjoy that experience you have, you will feel more motivated on have of acquire more knowledge. But if you don't feel like good and you have like negative thoughts, you cannot like occur there or get memorized something as if you have like positive thoughts. So I think it's related more like the emotions can affect or get influence in the experience you're having in your life.
Thank you, Hania.
I would like to add on to the point of Hania. Like she's talking from personal experience, but there's actually scientific information that complements and justifies her answer. And well, in the brain, the prefrontal cortex is involved in decision making, and it's also in charge of this interaction between emotions and rational information that we have and how it applies to cognitive processes. And it's been proven that emotions can influence and evaluate the options and guide part of the decision making. An example is patients with ADHD, which like when we don't when people that are not patients develop the prefrontal cortex, sorry, at their fully potential in the mid 20s, and patients with ADHD develop completely until mid 30s. So a lot of the processes a lot of the learning processes that are difficult for these patients come due to the communication between emotions and thoughts and how this affects decision making.
Thank you, Marta. Anybody else want to add on this?
I would like to add that I agree with everybody else because I think that when we emotionally engage with a subject, and no matter what kind of subject or thing we want to do, if we are more inclined to dedicate time and effort to comprehend it, because we get like emotion involved, and it's very important because sometimes emotions can lead us to a good way, and we can like put more effort in some activity. For example, me, I love soccer, and I didn't used to like it because I didn't understand it. But now that I understand it, I love to play it because it's something that makes me happy. So it's something that makes me want to put a lot of more effort in that thing. And I think that without that kind of extra motivation, because of my emotions, I think I wouldn't get to where I am in soccer. So I think that's a very good point of view of that.
Thank you. So far, you've all said, agreed on that emotions influence our learning process and that it can contribute to our motivation. It seems to me that most of you are talking about positive emotions or emotions that are enjoyable. Are emotions that are not enjoyable also valuable in the learning process?
Negative emotions present themselves the most when it comes to critical thinking and being able to evaluate and challenge our own beliefs and others' beliefs as well. And it exposes us to different arguments, and it also, even though it's a negative emotion, it can broaden our empathy and our understanding on other people's emotions and how they respond to different things.
Thank you, Maria Isabela. Anybody else want to respond to her or to me?
I would like to add also that I think that sometimes also emotions can get like motivation, and negative emotions can be used as extra motivation about something because maybe you didn't achieve it when you wanted to. So now you are feel like a bad emotion with maybe you are desperate, and you can use that kind of desperation and an emotion in order to push yourself to try to acknowledge that thing that you want to do.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I know I'm talking a lot about science, but I read, that's how I prepared for this session. But all emotions are valid for the knowledge acquisition. Like we have something called mirror neurons, and these are involved in empathy and understanding of emotions of others. So the activation of mirror neurons allowed us to stimulate and share emotional experiences, and then we can acquisite knowledge through observation and interaction. So if we see someone feeling this kind of emotion, like negative emotions, how we're calling it, we can get knowledge from this experience by empathizing, and it's also valuable knowledge. And sorry, an example could be if you see that someone is having a bad experience with anything, you can, and you know what brought that bad experience to them, you're gonna have this knowledge of not living, and this knowledge is gonna make you value the decisions you need to make, and then actually making the decision of not doing what the other person did.
Okay, thank you, Marta. Anybody else? Yeah,
Hi. Also, I wanted to add first, as a brief comment, that in the other topic that we were discussing, you, Thomas, commented about something about knowing and being aware of who you are and how you feel, which I personally think can be considered as one of the first and mainly important points today, because starting from there, you can know your abilities and limits that can be overpassed and work in order to discover new concepts, ideas, and also while wanting to explore and know other and new perspectives and situations in order to compare them to get your own conclusions, truth, or reality. And now with the other topic about the negative or impact that strong emotions can have in ourselves, I think that getting to this also negative or strong emotions that we experience or we have can be related to, although they don't always have the best reaction in ourselves, but that's just focused on how we manage and control them, because they can lead to motivation as other participants have shared, and it can work to look for ourselves and wanting to understand some different ideas, perspectives, and wanting to reach better feelings about a specific situation.
thank you, Pilar. Anybody else before we move on? No? Okay. So with Pilar's contribution, now we know that motivation isn't the only way that we can use emotions to acquire knowledge, and it really depends on how we manage emotions. But we all have agreed on that positive and negative, if we call them like that, emotions do contribute to knowledge. So the next question I have for you is, are there disciplines where emotions are considered more or less relevant in the pursuit of knowledge?
Emotions help create some of the most worldwide conflict amongst leaders. With emotion, it can lead to subjectivity, which is the opposite of objectivity, which means that a person's perception is perceived by their own judgment and opinion. And this can lead to negative worldwide conflict like the Russo-Japanese War, the World War II. It can cause negative things that with emotion. But with this negative emotion, it can bring new knowledge to history and cause us to learn what might happen again. Like they say, history repeats itself, so we can learn these, what's the word? These reoccurring events.
Okay, does anybody want to reply to Starlit or to the main question?
I think the area where we can see emotion the most prominently is art, and primarily in the form of a novel, because it describes knowledge, and its goal is to make the viewer feel an emotion. And throughout novels, we can learn different perspectives and we can expand our knowledge.
I want to add on to that with art and also what my partner mentioned with subjectivity. Subjectivity and having like bias in art is important because the viewer needs, like, having subjectivity in art allows the viewer to see art and to interpret it the way they want it to interpret it and based on their own perspectives and experiences. So that's what makes art so enthralling and enrapturing. So that's what makes art just that's why it captivates us, because of subjectivity. And so therefore that's more important. You're having emotions in art is more important in that aspect.
Studies, I think that it's also significant to recognize how math and science are on the that where emotions aren't really in knowledge, because within math, which isn't based upon knowledge, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry, Jude, I don't know if it was only me, but I sort of lost you in the middle of your contribution. Could you go ahead again?
Oh, so basically I was just saying how, like, on the flip side of the academic studies, instead of arts and English, we could, if you focus more on math and science, there's not really that necessity for emotions, because there's kind of more of a one definite answer that's either right or wrong, if that makes sense.
Well, also, as I commented before during the debate, emotions will always be there. They are something that are inevitable, although we cannot see them. We experience and outlive every single day almost every emotion that we have. And also, some people maybe think that in more rational and logical disciplines like chess, maybe emotions not have a main role there. But if you start feeling desperate, you can lose your total control and opportunities to demonstrate your capabilities in there. So emotions, I think that are something crucial when we react among social interactions. And this argument is not talking about keeping our emotions and feelings to ourselves, but knowing how to acknowledge that we have them, and in order and in relation with that, control them while using them as a strength.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I think that emotion mostly presents itself in the form of imagination when it comes to science, and there really is no science without imagination, because there is no need to, you don't, without emotion, you don't feel the need to discover new things, or you don't have that curiosity. And without that, you can't even do the first steps of the scientific method. So I think emotion is presented in every single thing we do, even though it's not seen that way necessarily.
Thank you, Isabella. I see we have some diverting positions here. Going back to what Jude said and going from this that you just mentioned. So if emotions are always there in science as well, and math maybe, should we take into account our emotions in order to take ethical decisions?
Yes, because emotions are reflected in empathy, and to make an ethical decision without empathy wouldn't be very successful.
Okay, so in my biology class, we're learning about the unethical biological projects that happened and how they were able to use the experiments that were that involved human testing and the dissection of alive humans and stuff like that, with emotions from the public, that because during these experiments they were being hidden by the government. With the emotions by the public, they were able to become knowledgeable of what was going on deep within the government, and they were able to create firstly in Germany, they were able to create the Nuremberg codes because of what happened, what tests were going on during World War II. So I guess emotions do help build knowledge in the sense of good and wrong still, so it does help create ethical decisions.
Thank you, Starlit. Anybody else?
I would like to add that I think that, yeah, it's important because understanding human emotions, from my point of view, is crucial for comprehending behavior and social dynamics. And it's also, I think it's important to recognize and incorporate emotional elements. I think that it can enhance the depth and richness of taking ethical decisions based on what we think and we thought that can happen.
Okay, so if we circle back to the initial question, are there disciplines where emotions are considered more or less relevant in the pursuit of knowledge?
This I want to share something that, for example, in other disciplines such as arts or literature, there is a way to express our emotions. And also something that we need to understand is that emotions help us to know us, to understand how we feel, how can we react to the things that we like, and but also the emotions are important in the way we act with the other people, and that can also be a way to increase learning. So for example, this can be when we are painting something or doing something that we like. This can be an external stimulation that we have for these emotions, rather they are negative or not, such as we call in the other things. So I think that yes. Sorry.
Thank you, Barbara.
Yes, I want to add that most of the time I think that when we have an emotion and we demonstrate is part of our person, so the emotions we have and how we reflect it to the other people is part of our person. So it is important to take into account when you want to take a decision or or an ethical decision of how to do or act in some way. So it is important to take into account your emotions so you can have like a good answer of it.
Thank you, Hania.
I also wanted to add that I think that showing some representative emotions about ourselves, it's something that can show our like human essence. I don't know if I could say it like that, because I definitely have the posture that allowing these emotions in a control or a knowledgeable area can help us stay with these human characteristics that are based in the interactions that we have as a society. These emotions makes us human, real, and mostly of the time empathetic with others.
Thank you, Pilar. Anybody else?
I would like to answer. So the question at the bottom, are emotions useful in decision making? In situations like, I just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry. You can take a second. You can come back to it.
Oh my god, sorry. So, just taking Starlet's words. So I think that emotions are useful in like persuasion. If the way that people talk and the way that people say things and the way they advocate for different ideas and ideologies, I think it's important to recognize how the way that people talk are persuade people and make people the way the words of people move people and motivate them and make them want to agree with you. So I think that emotions are useful in the context of persuasion. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, going off of my my teammate or my colleague, he just reminded me what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about how we as humans use our emotions to become knowledgeable of others' emotions. We have learned tactical ways and smart ways to manipulate people or persuade people to get the things we want. I keep bringing up World War II because I study it a lot here, but the chancellor of Germany in World War II, Hitler used his persuasion and his manipulation and his great words to sway the emotions of the people in Germany to follow his dictatorship. So yes, emotions do have a big role in decision making.
Thank you, Starlet.
I think that a good example for this of emotions can is useful to make of making decisions. I think it is important or a good example to explain it is about moving through the career. If you have like fear more in focus on in negative talks, you can when you if you feel fear, it is not like the fear is going to block up you and stop making that dream you have. So I think it is important to leave it behind that emotion and you try like the emotions don't block you and stop your decision making.
So to add on to like what Ania said about I think it was emotions, like don't let emotions block you. I can relate to that in a way because I play a lot of golf, and in golf there's a lot of discipline you have to have, and like when you're on the third hole and you shoot like you go off into like the terrain and you're pretty mad at yourself because it didn't go straight or like the way you wanted it to go, because golf is like a game of like centimeters. You have to pick yourself back up and not let the anger overtake you or your frustration over like consume you basically, because then you're just gonna be like performing terribly throughout the whole round. So you have to like pick yourself back up, reset, and then like just stay calm and keep going. And like the previous person said, don't let the emotions like overtake you.
Also, my argument, I don't think we'll stay with the concept of useful as it is, just like something that it's present, that it's always there. Because Sometimes we can be led to take bad decisions just because of how we feel towards a topic or also maybe a person. Although it's not like the best, there's not a shortcut known to avoid these natural processes that we feel. And an example that I can give maybe it's like, as we commented, manipulation. When although someone makes you feel bad and unworthy, maybe you want to stand for yourself in relation of how you feel, like maybe a personal attachment to this person. And even though that you know it's not the correct thing to do, it makes you stay in the wrong path.
Thank you, Pilar. So I think we've come back to this idea that emotions are always present and that they can help us know ourselves and learn about ourselves. I think it was Tamaron who mentioned earlier. But here in this discussion table and in the world, we're peoples that come from very different cultural backgrounds sometimes. And so I think we could move to answer a question. Do cultural backgrounds influence the emphasis on emotions in knowledge acquisition? Does our culture and our cultural background influence how we learn and how we interact with knowledge?
I can go. When considering different diverse cultures, I think it's significant to. It's important to know a sense of respect from both sides of the people, from both sides of the cultures. I think it's important that we recognize that the differences in our cultures aren't what separate us, but kind of bring us together. And a lot.
Jude, I think we lost you a bit there.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that actually our cultural background, maybe, yes, it can affect our knowledge because there are many different types and parts of the world and different cultures and different thoughts in every country. For example, Mexico, United States, UK, Brazil, maybe, and there are different types of cultures. And at the same time, people sometimes think different from each country because they have different ways to be raised. So they raise their kids and their family and they think it's correct. And sometimes the knowledge can change, or maybe cannot change at all, but it can be confusing or it can be like more like look over, but it's not really the same thing. And sometimes there can be like cultural, I don't know how to say it, but like cultural like um, problems or cultural like not comprehensible. And that way, it may not be understandable for both persons from one country for another to get into know to each other.
Could you maybe offer an example of what you said?
Well, I think that it can, for example, maybe in Mexico, we have a point of view, something like, I don't know, maybe religion, and in United States, it maybe the knowledge they have of religion can be a little bit different from what we have in our point of view from Mexico.
Okay, thank you, Maria Patricia. Anybody else? Maybe I can phrase it different. Yeah?
Sorry. Also, trying to complement what my classmates said, firstly, it's important to recognize and obviously to respect how the emotions and processes of other people in all around the world work towards so we can protect every participant from being hurt. Cultures have so many different ideas of many topics, like of how we are supposed to develop ourselves, but not just like that, but also whom are worthy to develop these different skills. I think that an example could be like in Pakistan, that some people, and specifically women, are not allowed to go to schools or learn or to decide how to dress or express themselves. So these are some cultural differences that we have nowadays, and we need to respect them, but also like to interact with them to understand from where they come.
Thank you, Pilar.
Yeah, I think our knowledge is also based off of our experiences, and depending on where you grew up, you're going to have different experiences. For example, I grew up between two different cultures in Mexico and in Canada. In Mexico, we have quite a corrupt government, and and not everyone supports it. In Canada, the government has mostly supported the people of Canada. So I'm going to have in Mexico in school, I'm going to be taught a different perspective on how the government works, and my perspective is going to change, which will affect my knowledge. But if I was in Canada, it wouldn't be the same. My knowledge would be different. And that's why it's important to socialize with different cultures so you can expand that knowledge and learn about things that maybe you wouldn't learn in your own country.
I like to add on her point of view. I think that knowledge and what we like comparing culture with knowledge, we have something that is the cultural values, and we learn these through when we grow up in a culture. So depending on these values, we're gonna take different decisions. And I don't like for me, an example is that in the United States, you need to call the teachers by the last name. In Mexico, we call them nicknames or their first name. So that's a difference, and that's a value, and values can be linked to emotions. So all emotions that are created by these values are going to lead us to take different decisions. And we talked about being open-minded. And to being open-minded is to have cultural values from all over, you know? So I think that these values determine if we are talking about how we're gonna take decisions and how we're gonna process our thinking. So as my it's not a classmate, as Maria, the girl that talked before me, said, I think that if you have a little bit of everything, a little bit of every culture, you're gonna be a little more open-minded, and your decision-making process is gonna be different from the one if you only choose to have one cultural value and not compare, because those are the ones who lead decision-making.
Thank you, Marta Sofia. Okay, so far you've said, yeah, culture gives us different perspectives, and therefore our experiences are different, and our emotions that we experience during those experiences can differ as well. So I was thinking of maybe rephrasing the question: do you think emotions are culturally universal?
I would like to add to this the cultural, how our culture affects our own knowledge. So I am a Navajo woman. I am of the Dene culture, and in my school, Navajo Prep, for our first 2 years before become an IB full diploma student, we are required to take Navajo classes in order to learn about our history and what happened to the Navajo people in the U.S. whenever colonization began. With this information that I had learned that the Navajo history has not been documented or has been taught in the rest of the United States besides on the Navajo reservation about what colonization had caused for the Navajo people. And this has swayed my emotions toward the government and how they are hiding our identity and our history towards the other people of our nation in the US. So I believe culture does have an effect of our emotions and the knowledge that we perceive with it. And with the knowledge that we gain, the best we can do is to try and educate people and use our passion for our name to be, I guess, renamed, because we are a dying culture. So yes, emotions do cultural does have an effect on knowledge.
Thanks for sharing.
We're all from different formed amongst different cultures. Maybe not necessarily all over the world, but talking about Mexico, Mexico has a lot of different cultures, traditions, and also social backgrounds in which we develop as ourselves. And our personal experiences obviously will be what we have been taught as good or bad things, correct or incorrect, or true or false. And although we are supposed to be something independent from others, and we can develop on our own and personal perspective, it's impossible to not be based from our environment that we had the opportunity to grow with. That makes me return to biases and personal limitations. Also, emotions, I think that can be considered as something universal, even though that we are not all having the same opportunities or being allowed to express them in the same way. And there are still some limitations that we as a society must work on them. But the first step here is being conscious about what we are discussing and sharing our opinions so we can say what we're feeling towards the people and communities that are around us.
Thank you, Pilar. Anybody want to reply to Pilar? To Starlit, maybe?
Yes, I was going to add what she says. I think that culture is significantly shapes knowledge and understanding by influencing perspectives, values, and interpretations. So, cultural context shapes how individuals perceive the world and what they consider valuable. So, that's what includes the decisions that we take. So, also the emotions themselves uh, can be taken as an universal thing that because that is influenced by the culture. So the emotions that are different, the ways that we experience them, that we express and that we perceive, and that's I think why emotions are culturally universal.
Thank you, Barbara, for making your stance as emotions culturally universal. Does anybody think the opposite, maybe, that they are not culturally universal? Okay, it seems everyone here thinks emotions are culturally universal. That's fine. Okay, so thank you. You've all agreed that our cultures do shape how we experience emotions and how we manage them, and maybe how we then approach problems in our societies, how we approach our government. I think it's time maybe to go back to the concept of sentipensares, because we've been talking about these topics only in terms of emotion and rationality. But is there something different in talking about sentipensares or thinking, feeling, instead of just talking about emotions? Why would we use the concept of sentipensares, feelings, thinking, instead of just talking about emotions? Yeah, Marta, I see you hesitating.
Because I think that, well, it all comes back to perspective again. We think that we have different ways of thinking and like our brain works in one way, but we actually think that we can be rational, but we can also have emotions influencing our answers, and we also can have the connection of both. When the reality is that we don't control how emotions affect, like on our brain, but we affect how do we react to that stimulations. And that's when we introduce the thinking. And so emotions are something that are always going to be present. But when we talk about thinking, we are saying that we can express in different ways. We can say that we are thinking rationally, that we are letting our emotions behind, or we're thinking emotionally, where we are not taking conquer facts like to separate both things. And we can also think that we're thinking objectively. So I think the question goes back to thinking and emotions, because we actually want to know until what extent emotions influence in our way of thinking, and when are we capable to decide how to think.
Thank you.
Just to add on to it, with feelings, I feel like feelings and emotions, like it's kind of hard to identify like the difference in them, but like feelings is kind of like where you're in a state of the emotion. Like, so if you're feeling sad, then you stay in that state of being sad. But with emotions, it's just like it triggers a feeling. So the feeling is like the state of it. But that's, I guess you can, basically what I'm saying is like you can change the state of your feelings, sort of. And so emotions doesn't always have to um, stay with you. But that.
Thank you, Tamarin. Anybody else?
Yes, I want to tell that I think that emotions they are more like the stimulations that our body perceives when we are making something, but feelings implies the thoughts that we think. So I think that feelings are what we learn from the emotions, and that's how we express ourselves, and that leads to us to take decisions.
Okay, thank you. Can you think of any? No, go ahead, go ahead.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. It wasn't my intention to interrupt. Also, I wanted to comment that although sometimes cultures and governments are like the principal factor that limits these opportunities or experiences among the people that interact all over the world, there are some successful actions that have been more difficult to apply, but decided and make a change. An example that maybe I could give in this feelings debate can be when on September 1 of 2008 that Malala Yousafzai decided that she wasn't accepting no more others on deciding how she was gonna develop and what was she worth to share with society. At the moment, she was led by her emotions and perspective of what she considered she deserved, what allowed her nowadays to be an important figure for women in order to stand for ourselves.
Okay, thank you, Pilar.
Um,
Anybody else?
I would like to add, and answering to the question that it was made, I think that emotions and studies are not maybe not the same, but they're like kind of a function of two ways of perceiving and interpreting like the reality that surrounds us, arising from reflection and emotional impact, like having a balance on which emotions and how we feel, but also in the way that we thought in order to have a very like to have a center thought that it can be and help us to think correctly, converging into a single act of knowledge and action in order to for us to take good decisions and not like the wrong decisions at the wrong time and that kind of things.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm okay. I'm ready. So answering the question, are emotions and centipede the same? Well, I believe they are in a sense that a feeling is an interpretation of an emotion. Emotion typically starts off as a sensation in the body, and when your feelings towards that emotion, interpret how you're going to react and how deep the emotion sinks into you and and with this, it affects the decision making and thought process of a person and how they gain knowledge.
Thank you for your answer, Starlit. Anybody else? Okay. Well, to wrap up, I was thinking of two things you said earlier. Well, some of you, somebody mentioned that it's emotions that make us human, and emotions are the ones that give us our humanity. But then we also have like this famous philosopher Descartes, who said we think and then we exist. So what would it be that makes us human? Are emotions more important in
Well,
giving us our humanity,
I
or is it?
think
Yeah.
I think that without emotion, there is no thinking. We can't think or rationalize without having emotion or the need to do it first. We wouldn't have our own thoughts. That is what makes us human with the emotion. If it weren't for those emotions, an example would be like a scientist needs an imagination, needs emotion to create the scientific problem. And without the imagination and without the emotion, there is no urge to discover that new thing or thought of how you could solve that problem or that question.
Thank you, Maria Isabella. Does anybody have a different perspective or an example, maybe?
Well, I want to say that the emotions, I think they are make us humans because it's a way for us to explore new things and, for example, to make us take new decisions, also to learn how to communicate with others and establish a relationship with other people. And by the way, that can help us to motivate in the way in this process of learning and to pursue us and push ourselves to be better. And by the way, it's a way to express ourselves and to learn or acquire new abilities for self-expression and also by using the creativity.
Thank you both.
Oh, excuse me. To elaborate on that, emotions, I believe, like, yeah, we do need emotions, and they do give us humanity. I There's like this burrito shop, like this local burrito place that we have here in town. That I've been going to since I was little, and okay, I'll be getting to the point. They they used to be like people used to answer with like regular people used to answer, but now it's just like a robot that answers, like one of those like artificial intelligence that they take your order, and they don't really like give you like the type of like the humanity like I used to experience when I used to go there. So I that's kind of absent now. So I think humanity, like emotions, do give us humanity, and it does like create connections in a way. So that's my take on that.
Thank you.
Also, thinking has these emotions inside, as I said, in an inevitable way, that emotions that have like the main need to be there in a conscious way, that you have them to in order to experience them, if you know what I mean. And also talking about philosophers of the decade, Socrates reflected about knowing ourselves. And I think this is important in order to reflect about personal knowledge, to be able to acknowledge the exterior selves or world that we live in.
I would like to add to that point. For me, humanity comes with emotions because as humans, we're able to recognize our emotions. And when we add emotions to thinking process, we're actually able to question ourselves and question our actions and question our interactions and how we and the world we are surrounded, and actually question our own existence. So I think that emotions give us our humanity to the point that we are able to question ourselves and question what we are doing, that we are conscious of what we're feeling, what we're thinking, and question that and try to find an answer that we're not gonna have it at the end. But if you think about it, all knowledge comes from curiosity. Like we were talking about disciplines and how emotions are connected to them. Science, math, art, everything comes from the beginning of curiosity, and emotions give us that. Emotions are the ones who make us question ourselves, and that's why we also have things like philosophy, that are things that only humans can have, because we are able to rationalize and think about what's happening and question ourselves and our surroundings.
Also, emotions can show how you perceive a situation. So, depending if you perceive the situation in a good way, in a positive way, you can have like a more growing up as you can grow more as a person. But if you react that emotion, you put it in react in a negative way, you can done like it can affect in your future in the decisions you're making.
Thank you. Is there any other contribution anybody wants to give? We have 5 minutes left of this discussion table.
I would like to add that emotions helps us to understand, analyze, and criticize in a variety of different and necessary ways towards just an individual case. I think that having and feeling these emotions, acknowledge them, is something essential in order to allow us to connect with others, and also understanding from where and why they think in a specific way or react differently from you in same situations.
Thank you, Pilar. Anybody else?
Yes, well, I would like to add that I agree with the question that emotions give us humanity, because I think that emotions are like an integral part to our humanity. They are the ones that contribute ourselves to empathy, connection, and the depth of human experience, and they're the ones that make us feel like maybe angry, scared, curious, and they play a crucial role in shaping relationships, moral reasoning, and our responses to various situations that may depend on the way that we're feeling about the way that we're going to react. And I think that emotions provide a unique dimension to human existence that give us like something special that made us humans, and influencing of how we navigate the world and relate to others, ultimately contributing to richness and our share like human experience with everybody else.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, I will just throw one very last question, and I ask you to answer it briefly. But how do you think emotions and sentipensares, to stay within the question, will help us solve humanity's problems in the future?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. I asked whether you think emotions will help us solve humanity's problems in the future, and if so, how?
I believe that along with emotion comes empathy, and if we're empathetic, we can decide to help other people and to solve their issues, and together I'll make the world a better place.
Thank you, Maria.
Can I talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I do think that emotions are going to be there and they're going to help us a lot in the future, because if they already help us now in humanity, if we kind of lose emotions or we as humans stop feeling, there maybe we develop any negative feelings or negative conducts that may not help us in order to help humanity in the future, and that won't contribute to the citizens and to the humans in general.
Okay, anybody else want to wrap this up?
I would like to add, like in a conclusive argument of all of the debate, that talking about these feeling dots that were being analyzed through the emotional part of the process can be an individual guide towards the areas of most or less importance or interest regarding the pursuit of knowledge. As I continually and repeatedly said during this conversation, well, we're humans and must accept and learn our natural process to rearrange and develop the information that we're given, and nevertheless, how and when to use it. These instant and spontaneous reactions, emotional reactions that we have, that we present, can be supported as a complement of the entire intuitive knowledge, providing insights and overviews to general problems that can be solved just through rational analysis. And I decided to have this perspective and talk about the individual guide, because every change starts with us being aware and deciding.
Thank you, Pilar, for that conclusion. So I want to thank everybody for your contribution to this debate, where this was not a debate, to this discussion, where we discussed how culture, emotion helps in the learning process, whether it is more valuable for some disciplines or not. We talked about how emotions are everywhere, and they also define how we experience things, taking into account our cultural background. And as a wrap up, you mentioned how empathy can really help us solve our problems as a humanity, and will create hopefully a better world in the future. So yeah, I want to thank all of you for your participation, for your insight, for your questions, and for being respectful, inclusive, and for sharing your experiences and personal ideas. It was an honor for me to be with you, and well, I hope we'll meet again in an event like this. Thank you. Yeah, goodbye. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the experience. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.